Every game in chess we look at has some invisible parts of strategy, such as activity of the pieces. And when we say activity of the pieces, it's a very wide subject. So when we talk about activity, there is such a thing as a good knight and versus bad bishop, or good bishop versus good knight, or good bishop versus bad bishop. And there are criteria which you have to go by to notice them. When we talk about activities of the pieces, there is also two different kinds of activities. There's two different kinds of bad pieces. Bad piece that temporarily stands not the best way, but can be activated very next move. That's called some dynamically bad piece. Or there is a statically bad pieces, mostly bishops. Let's look at them. Let's look at statically bad pieces, passive pieces. E4, E6, that's one of the examples. D4, D5, French defense, bishop B4, E5, C5, bishop D2, knight E7, knight B5. This is the variation I am recommending in my opening tapes, but we're not going to go with this, discussing this opening part. So bishop takes D2, queen takes D2, black castles, white goes F4, C takes D, knight F3, knight C6, knight takes D4, B takes D4, black plays bishop D7, white castles long, black plays knight takes D4, knight takes D4, knight C6. Now let's look at this position and let's discuss. We know what the bad piece is here. If you have some kind of a chess education, then you can notice the bad piece is black's light square bishop. This is bad piece because it's blocked by black's pawns. Black's F7, E6, D5 pawn structure determines and makes that light square bishop bad. Now, after knight C6, the correct move for white is to play knight F3. Now, why? Is that mean because our knight is better than black's knight? No. Knights are about they have equal value here. They are equally good. But what why we're playing knight F3 is just to show how bad, to take advantage of bad position of D7 bishop. What the knight has to do with it. Okay, suppose we don't move knight F3 and we play something like king B1. Then black is going to take on D4. We take back, queen takes D4, and black can play something like queen A5, and you can tell that when bishop comes to B5, or next move possibly, then light square bishops will be exchanged, and there goes white's main advantage, where they have the superiority of the bishop, white light square bishop against black's light square bishop, over black's light square bishop. So the way to play this position is knight F3. Now we notice that black is going to have very, very hard time exchanging light square bishops. At the same time, white prepares for kingside attack by playing bishop D3. For example, black plays rook C8, bishop D3. And let's say they play queen B6 now. What we're going to do in this position, there are three different ways to continue playing this position for white. One is go G4, F5, which may be very effective, and with the idea of F6, getting very strong attack on king side. The other way to play is to try to play h4, rook h3, rook g3. Also not bad way to play. And the third way, there is a combination here. Bishop takes h7. King must take on h7. Now knight g5 check. And when black goes king g8, now queen d3. This is little unusual combination. Now you see queen h7 mate is threatening, so only response for black is to play rook e8 or rook d8, and there is no g6 defense because after queen h3, black is getting mated in a couple of moves. So, and after rook moves from f8, for example, to d8, it doesn't really matter, actually, we get identical position. Rook d8, queen h7, king f8, queen h8 check, king g7, and queen takes g7, queen g7, and now black must go rook f8. Let's briefly stop on this position. White has 2 pawns for a sacrificed piece. We see half-dead bishop on d7, and white has overwhelming attack with possible f5 and f6, and white's position is very close, if not winning, very close to it. So now we have this position, and suppose the last move, black's last move was rook c8. Now that they realize that white has overwhelming threat, suppose they go f6. Now, remember, the bottom line here is white's main advantage here is the black's light square bishop. If black goes f6, now bishop takes h7. Combination doesn't work, but we can take on f6, rook takes f6, and we play rook h to e1. You see again, dark square weaknesses and bishop that most probably will never be activated. Bishop on d7. So this position considered very bad. There are ways to play this position. Some people may like, instead of rook e1, going g4 and g5. Some would like to attack right away, but I think most rational way is to play rook h to e1, and white has overwhelming control in the center, and e6 pawn is very weak. Now, let's go a few moves back and discuss this position from a different standpoint. The position where we played knight f3. We played knight f3 in this position. If we take off 2 pieces of the board here, we take off the board bishop on f1 and knight on c6. Then we're going to have very classical example of dominating piece on d4 versus permanently dead bishop. This is permanently bad because not even in next 30 or 40 moves there is a possible way with a reasonable play for white that this bishop can be activated. So this position is bad, but since we don't have a luxury of exchanging light square bishop for knight, after black's knight c6 we go knight f3 and just keep an advantage of our bishop against a light square bishop, and now we have space too, so we have good chances of developing very strong kingside attack. Let's look at the other example of the same nature, same pattern we use, different opening, and we can see those examples almost in every opening. So what you have to remember, what you have to do is you have to understand the idea what our good pieces are statically. That's the subject we're discussing now. For example, d4, f5, this is Dutch opening, knight f3, knight f6, bishop g5, e6, knight d2, bishop e7. Here's white white makes decision. They want an active play. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and play e4. F takes e, knight takes e4. So that's what white's plan is. White wants to play bishop d3, queen e2, castle long side, and if black castle short, to develop king side attack. You see the aim of those pieces, bishop on d3, knight on f4, push king side pawns, and get very strong attack. Well, however, this we made just several moves in a row for white, and in this position is a black's move. And suppose black plays something like d5. We'll play knight takes f6, queen takes f6, we go bishop d3, black castles, white castles, and black goes knight c6. How should this position be treated? This position is nearly won for white. Nearly won. What we have to do, we have to keep an eye on one very important aspect of the strategy. Weak square on e5. A lot of people may say, what's a one square? How can it be so decisive? Because, let me show you why. If we go bishop b5, now we're totally dominating e5 square because we want to exchange knight for bishop after bishop d7, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, and now we have total control on e5 square. e5 square is controlled by us, and bishop on c6 will never see light of day. So knight e5 at this point is inaccurate move. It's a bad move because black plays bishop b5, attacking rook on f1, and on after rook e1, queen takes f2 check. So what we have to do, just to prevent this is only threat by black, by playing maybe something like a4, restricting the bishop on c6, and after this play knight e5. Now white strategically is totally winning. We cannot go now through this all the way to the end of the game because then we will have no other subjects we can discuss here. So what we do here, playing a4, restricting bishop, dominating e5 square, we have strategically absolutely winning position. Now let's go back. Those are the couple of examples of permanently or statically bad piece, which is very, very bad for the side who is having it. But mostly we see statically bad bishop in French defense, when black plays French defense. However, you may ask, why does some strong players, some very strong players, to play French defense? Because it's very sophisticated opening, and they do have bad bishop, but frequently it gets activated and been compensated by other symptoms in the game. We cannot discuss this now. Now let's look at another activity of the pieces, and let's talk about passive pieces, which is not static but dynamic. Dynamic means that piece may not be standing very well, but can be easily activated. So when we say dynamically bad piece, it's a bad piece in that particular part of the game, and it's very time sensitive. Position may completely change if we don't take advantage of it in 2 or 3 moves. But in a static example, this is not happening. The position of when there is a bad piece, it stays bad for a long time. Dynamic is different. Let's look at the one game in particular I want to look at. A game I played in 1984 against famous that time Soviet GM Belyavsky, who was first board of our Russian Olympic team in Olympiad. So let's look at the game. Game was very widely publicized then. Knight f3, d5, c4, e6, b3, knight f6, bishop b2, bishop e7. This is ready opening and e3 castle. We don't want to really concentrate on this part. Bishop e2, c5, castles, knight c6, cd, and now if white takes ed, black takes ed, then white is going to go d4. So black played knight takes d5, now a3, queen c7, knight c3, knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, and e5. Now let's talk about this position. This is a little bit dangerous move, e5, because those pawns may be the objects of attack. So queen b1, very interesting plan. Queen b1, and here black plays a5 to stop b4. This is positional idea. I couldn't go b4 right away because then e4 is very strong. So by playing queen b1, white prevents e-pawn from moving forward, and at the same time preparing b4. a5 is designed to stop b4. Now after a5, queen e4, this attacks e5 pawn. e5 pawn has to be protected, and the way to protect is bishop f6. And now we can see that white's pieces are very active here. So move that was made by white is very, very strong. However, it's very unorthodox move, and it's very unusual move, h4. h4 is kind of move that is played with some very good and deep idea of being intoxicated. I was not intoxicated, and it's a very strong move. The idea of this move is to play knight g5, black plays g6, knight g5 has been played. Idea of knight g5 move is very interesting. Now white wants to go f4, and if white plays f4, that will be white is creating certain threats on the king side. Bishop f5 is not very good move, because after queen f3 there is additional threat of pawn to e4, and black will be getting in all kinds of trouble. So what happened here is h6, and this is the natural move. Like if white moves knight f3 back, maybe black will go back bishop g7, followed by f5 in the future. But knight does not go to f3. White knight goes to e4 after queen f3 first, attacking black's dark square bishop. Black did not play bishop g7 because after knight e4 it's very, very hard to stop knight f6 check, since pawn on c5 is also hanging. So move was chosen by black is bishop takes g5, hg, and hg. Again, this position, white sacrificed a pawn to get to this position, and white better plays, must play. They are very active. The bishop on c3 is very active. You have to take care of it. You have to take advantage of it immediately. So queen f6 is the move. And what should black do now? Black played queen d8. Is there any other move? I don't think so, because the threat on top of everything is f4, trying to open this diagonal, a1 h8 diagonal, which will be very painful for black. So black played queen d8, and now bishop takes e5. And you can tell that if black exchanges queens, then they have absolutely horrible game. Pawn on g5 is hanging, pawn on c5 is weak, white has two bishops and weak dark squares. So black must play knight takes e5, and that was played. Queen takes e5, and now they must protect the c5 pawn with b6. Again, it's not easy for white to take advantage of this position. Bishop c4 was played, because if black manages to play bishop b7, rook e8, and queen e7, they're going to have very good position. Bishop c4 was played, rook e8. Obviously, taking pawn on d2 is suicidal, because queen f6 move is very strong. Attacking b6 pawn and attacking g6 pawn. White is threatening queen takes g6 here with instant win. So move played by black is the best move, rook e8. And now queen c3. And black played bishop e6. Of course, the bishop on c4 is very strong, so they try to eliminate it. f4. What is the point of this move? The point of this move is black's king. That's the point. The reason why, because if black takes now, they didn't take, because then rook takes f4, and you can tell that all of a sudden black is in serious trouble. Threatening rook f1, doubling on f-file and creating a threat to take on f7, and in case queen leaves the control of h4 square, rook h4 may create very powerful threats. So move played by black was g4, and here another very strong move, g3. Now how can this be a strong move? The idea is the same. We own very powerful diagonal, queen on c3 on very powerful diagonal. All we need support, rook f2, rook h2, or maybe even king f2 and rook h1. White is going to have very strong threats. So after g3, black played rook a7. Now rook f2 with the threat that I just mentioned, and black played f5. Now rook h2, threatening rook h8. Only move for black is rook h7, rook takes h7, king takes h7, and now king f2. Very strong move, threatening mating attack after rook h1 check. And here black makes the only move they have here is queen a8. It's a long range control over h1 square, but after queen a8, very strong but not very difficult combination by white, e4, blocking diagonal, and very thematic combination, queen takes e4, rook e1. Now the idea of this move, the queen has to move and bishop is not defended. If queen goes to a8, then white will simply win a bishop. But if queen goes to c6, now we see the typical combination here. You see the queen is protecting h1 square. All we have to do, if we can kick this queen off the diagonal, a8, h1 diagonal, then we can play rook h1 with a quick mate in two moves. So after bishop b5, black has to resign, See, we're attacking queen and the rook. So if queen takes, then it's a quick mate. Rook h1 check. Queen does not control h1 square anymore. King g8, queen h8 check. King f7, rook h7 mate. So because of this variation, after queen takes e4 and rook e1, black played queen takes e1 check, king takes e1, bishop takes c4. And actually, I want to stop right here because game was very interesting as it turned out. And I take credit for this game being interesting because I made a very bad mistake in this position. If I, and after this, I moved king to wrong square. If I move king to right square, which we don't want to discuss because it's way beyond the subject we're discussing, then game would have been over in a few moves. But what I wanted you to look at, how right after the opening, the activity of pieces, white pieces, became critical, and black had only one relatively passive piece on c8, but their pieces were not prepared for such a quick, like the white's attack started practically on move 12, and this is not the usual thing you can notice in the chess game. So another game I want to discuss was also very interesting game played in the same tournament, in the same Olympiad, against one of the top grandmasters in the world at that time, Ljubojevich. And this will teach you something very interesting. So the opening was Grunfeld defense, but Grunfeld defense normally is played by black. So this is the normal way to play Grunfeld. And this opening is very sharp and very time sensitive, and one tempo can change the position from winning to losing. So that's not what happened. The Grunfeld defense that happened in our game was with the reversed colors. So was played like knight f3, c5, g3, d5, bishop g2, knight c6, d4. You see now white plays Grunfeld defense, but Grunfeld defense is very active opening. So if white plays it, that means white has an extra tempo, because those are the moves black makes normally. Since white started, white has an extra tempo. And that's why black has to be very, very careful what variation they choose. Castle. And I think inappropriate for black to play some active variations over regular Grunfeld defense, because they are tempo down. So move played by Ljubovich was bishop f5, c4, d takes c, queen a4. Now let's talk about this. Any ordinary player would think here about quick development and finish and safety for black, because white has already number of threats. But that's not Ljubojevich's style. He was very strong and very active player. He was craving always active piece play, regardless who he plays or what color he plays. So he played here knight d7, and he has an active plan in mind here. D takes c, e6, queen takes c4, bishop takes c5, knight c3, rook c8. Now I don't like already rook c8 move. I think the normal move is just castle. You have to castle quick. Position, files are open, position is open. You have to castle quick. He went rook c8, and I just made a normal move, not even suspecting what he wants to do. And here he went knight b4. But this is very, very interesting move and creates number of very vicious threats. But at the same time, it's very anti-positional. Because the reason it's anti-positional, white has no weaknesses. This is point 1. Point 2, position is wide open and black is not castled. This is point 2 and violation number 2. And point 3, you coming here knight b4, he wants to play knight c2, knight takes e1. This sounds little bit artificial. Now the concrete threats are bishop takes f2, king takes f2, rook takes c4, winning the queen. Another threat, maybe if I played something like e3, he may go knight c2, and rook does not want to stay on the same diagonal with the bishop on f5. But violations are more important here. After knight b4 and bishop e3, black is in very, very bad shape. I realized by playing bishop e3 that no matter what he does, he may win the material, that's what happened in a game, but he will never be able to castle, and he lost. Game was total game took like 17 moves. Black lost in 17 moves. After bishop e3, what black played, white played bishop e3, and well, let's see, if bishop takes e3, we play queen takes b4. This is clear. And they have no defense. So what was played here? What can black do? Let's talk. Let's look at the various different opportunities for black. So if they take on e3, I take on b4. Now bishop is hanging and b7 pawn is hanging. There are no threats. Black is losing pawn, or they have to go bishop b6, then knight e5. You see how clear is the violation. Now the queen is on the rook file. Black cannot castle, game is over. So the only move black has here is bishop e7, attacking queen, and queen f4. But if black castles now and then comes to their senses, it's a little too late, because then knight e5 and white is all over black here. So move that was played was knight c2, but now knight e5. Knight takes a1, rook takes d7. Black is an exchange up, but you can tell when we talk about passive pieces not only pieces that are way back. Passive you can also call pieces that is too far in and too far away from a real battlefield. Knight on a1 is extremely passive. It would have been better off on g8. So after rook takes d7, queen a5, rook takes b7. Material, let's talk about material. White has knight and a pawn for rook. So very minimal deficit. Black cannot castle because then bishop on e7 is loose. Knight and a1 has a lot of problems. Black is totally lost. Black went queen a6, rook takes a7. Now white is better. White is ahead in material. Queen d6, queen a4 check, Now king can never castle, king f8. Now bishop f4, threatening knight g7, knight g6 check, or knight d7 check, winning black's queen. And after bishop f4, here black resigned. Maybe white cannot win immediately, but position is so awful that resigning is the only way out of it. So this game shows you how premature activity can result you having bad pieces, passive pieces. Because if you are overly active, then if you're overly active with some pieces, that will make the remaining of your pieces passive. So you have to combine activity with development. You have to develop. Black neglected castling. Any weaker player would have castled, but strong player on Ljubojević's level, he was overly, I should say, too hyper to play this game on, and that was his style. He was always playing very active. That's why he was always very dangerous player to play against. But a lot of times when you play this style, you are dangerous to yourself. So that's exactly what happened. Now, next game I want to discuss was played against, in the same tournament in Olympiad, against a Cuban GM, Nogueiras, also a very strong player. So, and this game against Nogueiras developed like this: d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6, knight c3, bishop b7, e3, d5. One of the variations of Queen's Indian opening. So black's plan is to play bishop d6, knight d7, comfortably developing with a view on attack, which we are going to see very soon. Bishop d3, knight bd7, white castled, black played bishop d6, queen e2, knight e4. Why knight e4 now and not castling first? Is that something like I'm contradicting myself? I said that you have to castle before you start any active operations. The purpose of move knight e4 here is that black is trying to stop, in case of castling, to stop e4 move. And white is going to have some space advantage. So knight e4 was played first. C takes d, e takes d, and here white makes decision of exchanging light square bishops. Now let's talk about this decision. This decision is very controversial. Not necessarily bad. I don't think it's a bad decision. It's just controversial. White exchanging their better piece for the worse piece. Bishop on d3 is superior to bishop on b7. But on the other hand, white is weakening black's position on the queen side, and that's where they want to have their play, and they want to advance on the queen side. And next move by black would have been a6 possibly, and white will never have this chance again. So playing bishop a6 is not really a bad idea. Bishop a6, queen c8. I don't want to take this bishop because after queen takes, creates a lot of holes in black's position. Besides, d5 pawn is real weak. So if we exchange after queen c8, bishop takes b7, queen takes b7, bishop d2, castle, rook fc1, creating knight b5 threat. You see, white will want to get black's dark square bishop because that's the bishop that holds black's position on queen side and possibly attacking on a king side. So a6 is a good move, prophylactic, stopping knight b5, and rook c2. Now this position, how should black play this position? Playing c5 and playing on queen side is suicidal here, because white has all their pieces here, and they're going to have very strong pressure against black's pawns. So we have to play on the king side. How do we play on the king side? Queen is away, so queen cannot easily be transferred to the king side because of d5 pawn weakness. So what can we do? The move was played was f5, g3, blocking this bishop and also stopping possible f4 move. g3 is okay. Now what to do for black? There is a possibility that maybe I should free my queen by playing knight f6. If I play knight f6, I can free my queen to go queen c8, queen e8, and queen h5. And also, maybe I can go knight g4 and create threat on f2. You see some good points to this move. However, knight f6 move is bad move. The bad move because knight has a function standing on d7 to guard e5 square. Very important square on e5 we have to control, because after knight f6, knight e5, the black is going to have significant problems. So the continuation is rook a to e8. We continue building pieces in the center and getting closer to king side. Rook a to e8, queen d3. That's exactly, now we have exact position that shows passivity of black's pieces, temporary passivity. So white's pieces are temporary passive. But if black is not quick enough creating attack, white may develop very strong pressure on queen side. Example, they want to play rook c1, knight e2, and knight f4. And now you're going to see that pressure on the c file and well-placed knight's position will give white very good play. But it's not white's move. White just played queen d3, and it's black's move. Now knight f6 is okay, because knight e5 is not possible. The two pieces guard e5 square, bishop on d6 and rook on e8. Knight d2 f6, and white plays knight e2. How do we continue now? What's our plan? All our pieces stand very nicely. Well, before you get those pieces that active, it's easy to play. You have to bring them in the area where you want to play. But now what? If we play knight g4, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. He plays bishop e1. Now he wants to go knight f4 and rook c1, and white has their own plan of activating their pieces. So the correct move was played in the game was queen c8. Very strong move. Black's queen is aiming, does not need to stay on b7 to guard d5 pawn anymore. And you see why it's a good position for the queen. You see diagonal c8 to h3. I have no intention jumping over f5 pawn, but you can tell that queen on c8 in a few moves stands very well. Queen c8, rook a to c1. Now rook f7, bishop e1, and g5. That's the main idea. Now black wants to play f4 and start and getting every piece black owns will be over the white's king. And after g5, white cannot hesitate anymore. They have to do something. They have to do it real quick. Or after f4 and queen h3, it's going to be way too late. Rook c6 is the move. f4 and e takes f. Black plays g takes f. Now let's look at this position. Black's threats are very powerful. Queen to g4 may come, a queen to h3, followed by knight g4. This is going to be very deadly unless white does something right now. And white did something. They played rook takes d6. Black sacrifices an exchange. And let's look at this position. Now, I did not retake this rook, because if I did knight takes d6, I think white has very good position. Definitely safe position, definitely safe, maybe even very dangerously active position. Knight takes f4 and aiming for knight e5 next move. You'll see something wrong with this picture. Black just had overwhelming position attacking, and all of a sudden you see white's pieces dominate center, and there is no attack. But move rook takes d6, I expected, and I played f takes g. And white played rook takes f6. Now, if white simply retakes hg, then I play knight takes d6. You see, at least white does not have an extra pawn on h2. Now I can play knight takes d6, and after knight f4, black has an exchange, and white does not have even one pawn for it. That would have been probably the best way to play for white, to play just position with exchange down and hope for piece activity. But Nogueira's got kind of ambitious here. Well, he took on f6, and here gh, knight takes h2, and rook takes f6. White has two minor pieces for the rook, but white is totally lost. It's not the quantity counts, it's quality counts. Quality of black's pieces, you see every black's piece is extremely active. Rook on f6 is very active on a 6th rank and also on f-file. Black's queen, very active. Black's rook on e8, very active. And knight on e4, probably the best piece. So position is totally lost for white. White cannot find sufficient defense. f3. Queen h3. That's another tactical shot, threatening rook g6 with mating threats, and white cannot capture black's knight because then queen is unfree. Queen takes d3. So white's next move was queen b3, and now I have a variety of winning continuations. I can play rook g6 check, but I chose rook h6, and white simply resigned, because if queen takes d5 check, king h8, and you see that there is a threat of queen takes h6, and white does not have any defense to that. If they take the knight, then after queen takes h6, king f1, and we go rook f8, it's a very quick mate. Next move or two moves, white is going to get mated. So what happened in here? White did not make any positional mistake. Black got active position, and white's temporarily passive pieces somewhere white slowed down. And I don't remember exactly when, where, and what exact mistake they made. That's not the point. The point is to see how black took advantage of their activities, and quickly. They had to do it very quick because white's pieces were slightly passive, but that was very temporary. So if I slowed down a little bit, then we could have seen exactly reversed picture. So remember, when you have an activity like we had now, you have active pieces, you have superior minor piece. You have to keep a close eye on the position and analyze it. Is this the permanent activity? So can you play positionally, or you have to be very aggressive, or because your advantage may evaporate. So you have this position, you have this activity, and if you just slow down and you're not aggressive enough, this activity is going to disappear. It's like very, very delicate subject. And when you have an activity, whether it's activity on the opposite side from the kings or direct attack on the king, activity does not have to be against your opponent's king. It can be in the center, can be on a queen side if king's castle on king side, but this is activity. So activity of your pieces and superiority of your pieces may be very temporary. So that's why it has to be treated that way. And you can find examples of it like almost every other game you will see. You see the activity, it evaporated, or you see the activity that resulted in a winning game with some simple combinations. So if you pay attention to this very closely, you can learn a lot about activity. So thank you very much, and hope you do well. Bye.